당부들라. I like Geshe-la's new great compassion-led government. But a government is only as good as its public service. And Geshe-la's 닝지 그 티베 슝도 가보 배도 가보셔 중스러워. 아니 지 government 슝데 야마냐 생데 미망 셈셉지 같이 슈투모데 라레그레스. In this analogy, I think the public service, in this analogy, I think the public services, I think in this analogy, the public service is self-cherishing. 슝딩 인앙으로봐. 미망 샴테데 랑진징을 찾아셔서. This is going to make it difficult to get any of the new government policies pushed through. 근데 얘네가 아니 중사의 시주의디 아니 지도는 토는마 타주제를 가고 싶어 차그래서 before the next election in 3 short years. 로스좀 그 마상관의 시주 사바지 지도는 중게 시주에서 가고 싶어 차그래서 In the meantime, the opposition greed party, and in the meantime, the opposition greed party have worked up a great story. And then the Ganda Soba because greed na Dungamgi Tokojo, Dungamgi Tokoti, and it's then you do some showers and Mimang Gogodile. What is great compassion going to do to counteract that? And just the Ningji and Dongam Shungti, Mimang Gogodang, Dung Saba Suesha, and Rang Jenton, till a Ningji Shung Karchigri Sondo. Captain can reach out to Grace.
That day, Ningji, that thing's on around the Mulling Chashawina. And that. 닝지 기저세나 아메 가보치기도 미라 데다 먼저래야다 레와직 카리어라나 딩사 미망고지 닝지게 기저세운데 아니 중국 거제나래 아니 도와지 렉자시니 나래 탭티니 나래 가래나 닝지 기저세나 아니 가보치기도 알아 제산 디 갈때에서나 먼저라 레와직 요와드 땡브레스타 랑진지 기슝 탄데 따디 단능외네 주기 시고르당에 둠세오로 많이 바체로 랑저 지조디나라 아니 참진닝지 풍대요로가다 베데 랑진지 수수 병암 베샤 또 베샤가나 쭉 아니 베샤 요나야 왕 수수기 랑진지기 아니 수수 미릭당 수수 계급 미신 미릭신다 계급신 낭매드 당 대년랭게 담불린 강에 단당한 저 최단 최신바디 당절래야 레돔 레고자니 수바바즈 란진지 되게 아니 되게와디 정마다 라트레데 인디다 닝지게 페뉴라 미 가우체와 인자 미망게 퍼블릭게 가우치게 요인자 당저 저와 가려서나 지메 슝징나래야 아니 지 레가치니 칼체르 총송 칸데징나래이네 아니 지 셴뱅게 삼다니 닝지 삼다네 지 로숨게 계자마인바 미도네 미도 게 아니 차시 삼다니 미 삼로 자침부인데 아니 슝징나래야 먼저 왜 편제 가셔라도가 퍼블릭을 세시드는 가오메 지도시 가서나 수수 야구로 휴지인배 줌진세제네 첩식대 두자래 나 두자드나 두고메 나 야구인 수 통거다 또 논주래 가서나 첩식이 강해요나 아주 상마 강해 되거다 대냠녀데 당아주 별로 총어라 아주 별 명예마 첩식 주저 총어 수수 최체 대대 담아들라 다 롱바 매비세 다 잡주를 도 잡주 땅아시다 잡주 니워차다 자갈 잡주 직수 뉴질랜드 잡주란다 말해대 다 전라 잡주래다 다디 차식 돈에 차러와 저 상마 미망하게 삼단다 노르 미망 그런 노르와 삼단다 디네 인디 장갈랑 저 이러요레스 rewa shibuji yoresra. Rewa chambu dos, yuwe maze.
I like to remain more upbeat and optimistic because I see hope. Despite clever Green Party schemes, but I see hope because the language compassion has now become kind of a topic in the main public discourse. In the public discourse, people, whether it's a leader, whether it's educationists, so now people are embracing compassion as a value, and therefore giving more emphasis to compassion, its role in family, in the community and society at large. That compassion has become important, and it's important. It's not concoction. It's a reality. It's happening now, because people have also woken up to how self-serving, self-cherishing, scheming, supervisor has exploited people with hidden agenda, but public using public interest in the discourse. They introduce sudden they introduce hidden discrimination against in terms of race, religion, gender, and so many other things. So that a lot of societal problem is the work of the self-serving, Rangchensen or self-cherishing, self-centered boss has now become quite apparent and quite public knowledge, and therefore people have had enough of it. Enough is enough, people think, and now they want a new direction led by public by compassion. So I feel in the future more and more people should enter government and take positions, high, middling, and so on, so that all like-minded people, all altruistic, compassionate, like-minded people form a strong team of compassionate force, not planning to bring a success until the next election, but thinking long term, 30 years, 50 years, what we can do so that self-centeredness never gains an upper hand and opportunity. So a lot of people say, oh, I don't like politics, I hate politics, and they get out of politics. I think that's a mistake. Almost to say they are trying to prove that they are above politics, and politics is to be not to be appreciated. People, if they are really interested in bringing about greater public good, should take greater political role. That's the mistake that Tibetans made for generations. People became too engrossed in Dharma and political affairs, which have impact on how Dharma may be practiced, was left or was neglected, and ultimately we have paid a great price, lost the country, and became, in my case, I became a refugee from Tibet to India, and now I'm in New Zealand, a second time refugee. Not that I don't consider that as a refugee, but practically I don't have my birth country. So, therefore, I say compassion-led government will prevail.
세상 로아다 간저 지조디 때문에나 아니 상마강이 되더라. 세상 지조 때문에서는 내가 친이디 야부지 거거든. 당한저 변나 뉴질랜드라고 이나 당한저 미 제가 칠로든 정한저 피도 치도 말랑 알아서 뉴질랜드이나 세상 슝기 산에기 슝지 미도서 야부거야. 신지 실론 야부거야. 슝게 최저나게 미도서 베닝제 유니 신빙 삼로다니 미야고던데 그래서 왜 팬 전환신의 급이나 아니 단다 야고도 단대 슝지 변나 먼저 신지 아자디 닝제게 제시도 빼 야고다 잠블링 나라 빼던 야고 샤송하다 로 이제 두조다 먼저 답자 뭐서 녀야도 와 되게 지 미만을 삼노다니 간다 내가 지니디 빼샤 찍고 삼노만에 빼샤 거다 걸어 미만을 삼노다니 이게 미디고 고요래 간다 뒤에 흉증 신다도 빼샤 삼단 거 뭐지 미만 삼단 거면도 미만 삼노다니디 아니 먼저 미만 뒤돌려 편도 연거로 미디 다 신다베 자신부 띵서 마시는 미디 미만 삼노단 거도 빼샤 삼노단 거도 삼노다제 흉진나라 미디도 땅토베이나 아니 네 먼저 미만 삼노다니 미지다 고고였다 이제 먼저 지도데 대고 먼저 지도나 초고라라
So it's very important, isn't it, that we have stable society, that humans at large, wherever they are, that they have a stable society led by stable government of public people with the public spirit, leaders, holders of the position with the public spirit. If the leaders whose dealings have impact on society are lopsided, self-serving, then it really impacts negatively on the public. So we need good people. For example, New Zealand has a very good leader. The current leader, she is well liked, for she is genuinely interested in the public good. So in the future, we have to think about, or leaders should have to think about people's interests, people's welfare. So when it comes to choosing, we should have a sense of discernment to check whether candidates wanting to hold public offices are money-minded or public-minded.
당연한 저 자천부 치도 말인데 수수연라 수수 당고 수수 닝지 냠는 세제 수수대세 연연 구육되나라니 닝지의 지도지တွင်투 중도나 따디 먼저 치토비아 내가 드렸어. 뒤 먼저 배제쳐 버렸다.
So if one is unable to play a bigger role at the governmental level, but that is not to say that one is ineffective playing a good role at the local level. So in the local area, there's every possibility that one can, spurred by compassion, do things for the good of our local community. It is something that we can do ourselves.
알아서 제버디 냠내 쳐고로 닝지 냠내 쳐고로 닝지 냠내 쳐나다 수수 먼저 미래를 지겐데 먼저 미주둑 줍된도와 먼저 미래를 집주된데라 수수 그 파마 빈자 토고 여러와 너 세제파 도 스자제 당토베이는 먼저 미주둑이 이니 미시기 지도 서토베이나네 먼저 지도 어스자 전부 닝지 요바지 서토 용고도 갈래로고 제가 미국질 학습지 서도보다 지도 서도보다 먼저 미cal 학습지 지도 서도보다 아니 로
Yes.
those channel da chitubya dere dang da de chitu
So my optimism for the compassion-led government comes from the possibility of grassroots compassion, or compassion at the grassroots. So that if we ourselves genuinely have compassion, not just pay lip service to compassion, but have compassion, so that we, without being boastful and without being ostentatious in our demonstration of compassion, just compassion naturally permeates in our interaction with people at home. So if there are 16 or thereabouts of us here, so if each of us develops tested, calm, unruffled compassion, then that really will permeate among our families. And therefore, if in a family there are 4 people, then we'll be able to affect about 60 or more people. So, and then this will have a rippling effect.
The
second question: if it is not the I, the supervisor, that caused what the aggregate have done or performed, then what did? If it's not the I, then 풍부 라가 가르쳐야 되더라. 풍부 가르쳐야 돼. 아는 따도 지금 nga 줘라. 따도 뱅에 아는 꾸버 많이 배너라 봐. cause 많이 배나. 아니 가르쳐야 버렸어. 가르쳐 버렸어. Then what made this happen? And the condition 풍부 the 가르 and the young with the 가르 잡으래서 what made this happen? And lag 잡으래 야만 지기 just cause and effect good debut 아니 지기 풍부 lag 잡으래 good debut 잡으래 까매 잡으래 가르 잡으래서
어디래 다디 독서와 풍불레 텐신베 다주스 스코르다 풍불레 텐신베 풍불레 더메든 저기 다샤기 왕저 어디 먼저 런젠지 와 런젠지 런젠지 요 말다 야 부부 좀 세번하시 sö셔 갖고 제가 그 메든 저기 자와치도고 말와 근데 풍부단 더메든 저기 다 되게 그 매번 인사 그 레거 꾸투고요 말에 다나 레거 스위치 거르스나 풍부당 더야 된 조지 맞죠 그 파즈 더야 된 조지 땡데스기도 더야 된 조지 와 풍부 gen직 제도 nga gen직 지금 기생 당부 탄여에 대해 nga들 랍송아 nga 락바나도 nga 나가도 라가도 코니 파즈 찍찍래 더야 된 조게 nga지기 아니 레가 지기 여름이지 더 매된 조게 nga지기 내가 지금 요 말어 어딜라고요 네 여체 그랬어 데미지 nga지기 아니 요 말에 보스디 요 말에 세상에서 보스 맨저 참아 야 루루스제 아니 도대기 여자 아니 먼저 로그에 나는 도대기 여서 당서 연조지 간다 이 도고요 레스
So this question has relevance to or pertains to an I that is unrelated to the aggregates, which is sufficient substantially existing self, and which we have, or nominally we have in our story given a ministerial position, but that ministerial position, that minister, is just a child's story. Children just cooked the story and then made such a minister. But in fact, this sufficient substantially existing I self different from aggregates does not exist at all. Because it doesn't exist, how can it make aggregates do anything? Because it doesn't exist, there's no way it is able to perform functions. So what what makes aggregates do or activity or perform function is an I that exists. So is there an I that exists? Yes, there's an I that exists dependently on aggregate, having inextricable relationship with the aggregates, such that the relationship is so entrenched, so inextricably strong, such that when any of the aggregates perform a function, then the I is said to have performed a function. When any of the aggregates perform a function, then credit is given to the I, and calling it a nominal I. Conventionally, that is given a status called nominal I, so it exists. So our problem has been believing in a ghost I, and then thought to ourselves, well, it exists, it's really powerful, so I have to follow the injunctions issued by that I, and so on. So we have been misled, wrong information given, and we followed the acted on the wrong information with a disastrous outcome. So we need to turn the corner, turn around, and then deal with something that is real nominally, which is the nominal I. And it's the nominal I that is attributed to perform functions by way of its relationship with them. So that is a brief answer. Let me give you a more detailed answer later on. But before that, there's a question here. Please, Geshe-la, give the recipe for lung as mentioned in the last retreat. Oh, recipe for recipe for lung. Oh, wind disease. T for wind disease. Geshe-la, ana lung le pembe jag recipe jora ba. Lung le ngama last retreat ngam deba retreat la ba. Geshe-la ana lung ma chaye ke jag jor singos. Di recipe de ta ma pembe chang ngor na ro na so de.
Ta dibe konchen bore.
Oh, it's very expensive.
Yeah. Dinge donde data sugar teach down right.
So indeed I will give it to you later.
Sugar they already. Yeah, what those songs and the manguma don't that things are how much more. How much more you do mangushira don't you call church lay on the general church pay a set in the user. I mean, 당연히 제가 dundarere tingwa chikse nize tungna tiksarwa lungla pentajo pingedo di.
So it does help lung wind disease, but I would say that use it sparingly at this time of the year because it's quite hot, and that tea recipe tends to generate heat, so maybe one a week. And so not on a daily basis. Only when you have lung.
Yeah. Oh, did it that Tanda Dilara that do Slavi Nanzo, Umashijeva Nala. uma 시집에 책지여와 소나 멤버 당보도 세죠. 소나 멤버 당보도 바드 단이 또고 당스
바르도
단이 또고 당스 바드 단 타마다시 군도 왔어. 타마다시 군도 왔어. 강기 강기 시디 개발인이라라 강기 시디 개발인스 소나 멤버 당보도 제 그래서 바드 단이 또고 당스
바르도 단이
또고 당스
또고
타마다시 군도 왔어.
타마다시르
따싱 타마다시
따시그리 따싱리
따싱
라타다타르
저다다다라 라도다다르
라타다타
샤주싱하시
타마다싱
군도 왔어.
라스
강기 시디 개발인스다. 어디 다 저잡나 당기 조응오마디 저요 대도아티다 직라고야지 차대기 요.
So in relation to the previous question about self-sufficient, self-centered existing self, I'd like to answer that at some length by using, depending on a stanza that comes from Aryadeva's 400 stanza. There are 4 lines, and each line, okay, the first line says, Sonam member Tangpurdo. First avert or prevent the non-virtuous. First avert that which is not virtuous. Secondly, or intermediately, stop self. In the middle or intermediately stop or prevent self. Tama tashin kuntoba. Finally, stop or prevent all views. Tashin kuntoba. Okay, finally see the view and stop all. Tama means finally, touching means seeing the view, kuntokpa means then eliminate or stop all. Gangde sheba kevayin, gangde sheba kevayin, gangi, sorry. Gangi means they who know this are wise.
제상다 소나 민바 당보도 라디 다 당보 릭바 옹보 듀바디 셰고로 옹보 듀바다 가조 베나 둡다 체운디 치라마 도데와 다도조 르즈기 릭도조 다 지당기 소나 민바데 당보 가르도 거라스나 가조 치실런진지와 다디 도그레스 거래 다지로 하진데 베진바데 치실런진 다 치실런진 비자 자고레스 거래.
So what the first line, when the first line says, initially or firstly, prevent, stop, or oust, that which is non-virtuous. So this has a reference to ousting foreign minister of the view of independent, unitary, permanent, unitary, independent self. And this is that reference is made, or rather, this information is given. This information is given to the Vipashaka and Tantrika schools, and asking them, you must evict your foreign minister from his post. The foreign minister holding a very permanent, unitary, powerful post. Oust him.
제가 다 나서야지 개주 딱바래 있으라고. 다 딱바 말해. 나 미다고래 있다. 딱벨로죠. 나 미다고래 있으라. 미다고에 미긴지 개지 기주어도도. 다 당기 세워 나시래 미다고 라고 미다고 참모 삼다운데 아니 나서야 돼 그냥 야면은 나서야 돼 뒤제 말했다 그러 다 나다고 이나 아니 개와치 두고 말해 미고 용 두고 말해 나다고네 말해 제가 나 뒤제래 뒤제이나 미다고 인고 그래 제가 다 나다고 다 뒤에 민도 다고 레민도 제가 다 콜라 디 치실렌진 흉진 신다되게 치실렌진게 디 아니 더지로지 동아도 별로디 아니 먼저 닝지기 먼저 그 그룹게 다 치실렌진에 군이 누가치 좀 쇼고 왔다 군이 저거 잡으라 저저디 아니 더지로지 저디 다 쇼고 왔다 나라 잡대민도 당아 요만에 배 논조레시다 건다 당아 두게 인세 아니 그 저거 잡고 왔다
So then you think you are permanent, but you are not permanent, or I is not permanent, because I is conditioned, I is composed of due to causes and conditions. I certainly you are not seen permanent because you change at a gross level and at a subtle level. Given that your position is no longer tenable, and please leave the office. And now the compassionate government foreign minister advances this argument that you think you are permanent, you can stay there, but no sorry, because of these reasons. Thank you, and the door is shown.
제가 안다 디 따지로 하진 제주 숨도와 디나게 미다고도 또나 제주니디 란슈기 킥도고요. 제가 내 제주니디 시라 마셰다 셰메 제가서나 데스 아니 투부를 차도 그래라 규제는 메데 라와사데 야고도 하거든요. 남상라 트도 그래. 미다고디 인도 계지계지 교어도데 가래. 규제니도 지레스. 규제니도 중앙 인자 아니 미다고 차도 그래서도 규제는 메데 라와사데 란슈기 킥도 그래. 다 데나네 제주 숨디나네 또 깔레 카슈데 미다고들 미다고도 또나 아니 제주니디 란슈기 킥도 그래. 제장에 되게 미다베가는 또 신다니도 마셔봐시 샤임바 지라시라 셰메와데.
So you will have noticed that of three attributes of permanent, unitary, independent self, and I have harbored in my explanation more on talking about emptiness of permanence. In other words, it's emptiness, it's impermanence. If one understood impermanence of self, by implication, the other two factors are relatively easily dealt with and easier to understand. And this the other two, like unitary and independent, are under secretaries of a foreign minister, and with the foreign minister gone, and then they too will have to pack up. Anyway, round one, the attribute of independent is quite relatively easy to understand, because I depend on many causes and conditions. How could something that utterly depends on something else, meaning causes and conditions, be independent? No.
제가 니네 디도 이제 미다고임바 나데 미다고임바 또 이제 아니 차셔르메데 지부올라데 캐도고요. 그래서는 미다고 또 이제 뉴제도 인도라 올레라버라 뉴제리시 뉴제스도 아니 망보 쉬부직 루루 체제 아니 교도 뉴신 쳐버와 또 레다 뉴마시나 갑디 카둑데라 아니 직 풍부다 근데 망보질라 때 밤에 샤다다 근데 망보질라 때네 중시 중대적 속과직 아니 풍봉하고 간상기 친이라 풍멍하고 가run라 때내 딱던 거예요. 세상 그 풍멍하고 가run지도 풍멍하고 나네야 줍된 조시레샤 삼당인데 차셔라 메데베 직보 다 론리네스 증명도 쓰러 제가 직보서 차셔 메데 직보라데 미다고 더베 슐라 단대디 차셔 메데 직보라 다나를 풍멍에 나네 직보로 줍된 조시레 좀 지금 콜라 때마다 근데 삼 띵사부 단계요 말에 테마 띵사부 들어나 야메 랑원에 두었으나 도도고요. 제장에디 데시 두 삼다샤나 딱 미다고 또르디 체준이디 쇼라 또르고요. 차셜메도 지보라디 와다 지보치민도 고주 예몽부질 때네 총샤세들이 람사 킥 삼로디 킥도도 알아 봐.
So as well as when we understand impermanence, the second attribute of a unitary attribute of self is also dealt with because I is impermanent. It's impermanent because it's brought together. Duje means it's a condition composed by causes and conditions. So it is dependent. It exists dependently. It functions dependently on many factors. For example, on the aggregates. And for example, I is composed of physically shata means blood, flesh, bone, and whatnot. So by definition, I is so person is okay, an I labeled dependently on one of the aggregates. So its existence is always in connection with others. So it's not able to function unitarily, independently, not depending on anything else. So that also, so impermanence is helpful to deal with this topic issue.
다들라 먼저 공자조디 뒤에 마 공연도 당보 응아시아디다 딱버드면도 미다버리샤 주어두도 와서와 주어두고요 자자자두 ngoynezu reality로 ngoynezu디 주어 이나가서 셈나라 다 단기 진단하려면 단다께지 단기께지 신이 단단히 직바인도 다 투절을 맞아야지 단기게 나한테 단다 다 계산다 드린다 로가리즘 데 삼당도도 다른 쇼에 대한 말이에요. 다른 가서 퇴바 제시하러 가면서 퇴바제 다른 다 단다 깨지 시기 깨지 요시로 되게요. 딩언저 다 직받다 되게요. 아니 ngaji jingzi sade te tangzi lenje na lengyo lenje konga shushu ge lenje na wa de sha de zimba de lenje ge yonde ge yorwa jedan de inde de doya la da midagwa chamu to na me shuji ge do tu go yomar de inde ta dambo midagwa rakwa to tene midagwa chamu jumzen la de ne do tu go yor nganzo wa jumzen la de ne da 레샤 계지 주어도 도미시다 대학 투즈큐는 민도스다 간다가 뭐고 인친제라 카가 대제 대학 투즈큐는 민도 그 가드위네 로데도 시야지다 심나라 니신예베이나 아니 데다 단지 칼레 식도고 여러 단지도 마 칼레 식도도 아니 치실런진데 바바에 당겨다 칼레 근데 그래로 요마르다 그 치실런진데 제가 통마메 차로 통마메바네 님도 단질 현재도 레데르와 시질 현재게 로바 유나면나다 조직 데르와 디간라다 제주니디야 잡제다 고 간사다고 레샤 홍불레 텐신베 다고 레샤 치료버도 저 콘조 캘렌치고 여러 먼저 캘렌치기 요 말바다데 남바산제베 캘렌치기 말바 남바산제베 이나 최남제 돈신 다음에 왔어야돼 아니 더지랑은 지 동화들 전당서 다고가다 체제 신나라 뒤제도제 미다와 사제듬제 동화 최남제 돈신 다음에 왔어 최남제 돈신 다음에 왔어야돼 남바산제베 탐제기 캘렌야돼 더지랑은 지 동화 다음에디 캘렌치고 여러 어디 내가 심어 제가 레스트
So, impermanence is something that we try to meditate more often than not to deal with the first distorting attribute of distorted attribute of permanence attached to self, by saying self undergoes a lot of changes and momentary changes and durational changes, and it's a reality. So that said, we are not really yet able to see the subtle impermanence, because although by now we see that I yesterday and today's I, yeah, definitely different, and I this morning and now definitely different, but the I a minute ago and now, now quite difficult to say they are different. They are so close, and then ngaji jikten, I I a moment that I a moment prior and moment later, they are so close. They ever, although they are different, due to their near contiguous proximity, we can't help seeing the two eyes as being one. And although it may sound academic, but it's an important issue, and this leads to if this inability to see the two moments of very short duration as being separate leads to appearance of innate permanence, and leads to innate grasping at permanence. So unless we really understand emptiness, nor impermanence, clearly this cannot be easily understood. So time, when we think of time, if you understand, time is something that never rests. It just moves incessantly, and it moves incessantly. And if that moves, then impermanent phenomenon, also incessantly moves. And when that happens, then we can say bye-bye to foreign minister. And however, proponents of the non-Buddhist school, they would vehemently defend the position that I is permanent. But we need to understand their position and how the position can be rendered untenable or repudiated. So we repudiate the position of permanent I because recalling a statement of four seals, that all conditioned phenomena are impermanent, and the fourth seal is all phenomena are empty and selfless. Therefore, selfless in the sense all phenomena. In this case, I being one of the phenomenon, impermanent phenomenon, is empty of being permanent, and this this kind of I, being empty of being empty of being independent, unitary, and so on, is a position of I held universally across Buddhist schools of thought.
Oda di toba ina yang, ta je rong je ni tong ta ta me de toba ina yang. Ta na ta nga sini sha de ta phumu nga la wan ju bo ta bi ta rang ja wa chi. Sha ge yore swa. De la rang je de ze yu sa de ta. De pa du da ni toba ta sa de ta. Pa du da ni to sa ta de ne ta nang si le je, nang si le je. Nang si le je de ta nor thang mo ta bu ja de gra. 다 난슬련진데 데지 레라고 요마르와 제가 파도 단에 더서야데 아니 풍봉아 완주어부 따베게 아니 다 대양 따거레세 랍티야면죠 미다거레세 랍티야 메딘조지 조드메베 따세지 어디샤기요 데켈레니 남바 요레 좋아 딘데 켈레니 남바 치다마거든데 요레 제가 주르베 켈렌치기 요레 데 조드메베 따세지 다 단다 디 낭베 켈렌신이 요 인상 디스테스 작 그런저 마다 삼로당 용디 베진 딘데지 요서에 튕겨요래 마스디 공부로만 주어부터비 게네지 뽐본당신지 도제 아니 디다 다고레세 랍테면죠 미다고레세 랍테면죠지 저드메베 따센시 샤그요르와 다디 다 두두 삼로 당는 가란줄라 렌지게 요래다 렌지게 짐바디 요래 그러와 어디 메바디다 세우시고로 풍부로 완 주어버 대비게 다디 요나 당이 세우나시 렌데게 땡치니 긴지치니 미다고 연구를 네 다고레세 라트야 미도레셀 메데 용고부지 풍송바지 요마라 야메나 다고 연구를 야메네 미다고 연구를 풍송배 ngobuji shadu marwa cheza di rigbadu zunne yongorwa da
So once permanent, unitary, and independent self is eradicated with the foreign minister, with that gone. So then we come to the second view of self, which is self-sufficient, substantially existing self, which we have given the position of home minister. And the home minister is quite clever. He looks after all the wealth. Anyway, in the 400 stanza, if you recall, there were 4 lines. The second line says, Bardu Dani Tokpa Tang. Immediately, self is eradicated, or self is eradicated, stopped, or prevented. And now, the second stanza has a reference to eradication of substantially existing self. Substantially existing self, which even Buddhists, let alone non-Buddhists, even Buddhist schools of thought, some of them say that this self is inexpressible, hard to pinpoint, to say whether it's permanent or impermanent. And yet it is seen to be, this is seen to be Pungpalo Wang Gyuopo, somebody that controls the aggregates. Somebody controls the aggregate, and So we have got this innate grasping, this innate grasping. So how can we deal with this? How can we, while it from while frequently it appears quite vividly, self-sufficient, substantial, existing self appears vividly, uh, and then thinking to ourselves that exists. But now the question is how to deal with its non-existence. So how 대기실에 매당 가르쳐라는 게
나
대 매당 대 풍부된
와다
대 매당 대
와다 매단데 가르스나 따민다 칸데 줘드면 용어버지 샤도고 말아 야면나 딱바 연구를 야민다 미다와 연구를 딱
풍수는 자동 말이죠.
샤도고 말 줌전 찍듯이 니와데 딱 해서 미다와이나 아니 주어도 요러 미다와레스 줘도고도 와 찍대로 와 아니 풍불 완주어도 풍불에 완주어부 텐션 샤요 말이야 당기나시 풍부당 저어야 되고 군이 봐 풍부 gen직시도 nga gen직치기도 어디 셰용고로
So now the crucial point is how can we see that that such an I doesn't exist. So that I is believed. Okay, that I has either it has to be either permanent or impermanent. There are only two options because I is self-sufficient, substantially existing, is by nature composed phenomenon, and it is impermanent. But you say it's neither permanent nor impermanent, and you are positing a third possibility, that which is neither permanent nor impermanent. That is impossible. Therefore, it's not tenable to hold. It's not tenable for such an I to exist. Secondly, that I is mitakla means impermanent. It is surely impermanent because of visible changes taking place. Secondly, that I, how can it be a controller of aggregates, self-sufficient, substantially existing, like almost controlling aggregate, as if it were different from the aggregates. The controller and the controlled are different, but that means it exists outside. How is that possible? And besides, short of functions performed by aggregates, how can it perform any other? What can it do? It is not able to do any. It's not able to perform any function on its own accord, devoid of performance functions performed by any of the aggregates. So that means it's not self-sufficient. It's dependent. It's very much dependent on aggregates for all its functions. Therefore, its position is untenable.
데 가단다 되주도도 반된 다워터 우마주베나라 세고 싶지요라 다디 페지다 네 기승내 셰브나 신 우마주바 가상기 다다 신대되베 다다란대되베 다 서브젝트 기승 담니 마 도버디나 신레 티카두도 마 베젤로 지기나 공바럽세다 되잖아 베나 우마주베 자웨나라 네 여러와 가직 디니 신이 담에다 라서 주면 간사 제유 되서야지 아니 남바 치료보 마세 아니 란디 지라마 가직이 장 아니 간사 다 세야지 풍불에 디니 신도 줘도메 다 버려서 줘도메 아니 미다 버려서 줘도메죠 아니 딘데기 제유 니 레치보보 leg debu didu nyobo sawobo ane khowar chingbobo ane nyangde tawa dobo odinde jila ane das tu yore zende doba de sebu shibji she yore digadogi umajugwa de kaji tini shini ta meda sro laso jume kansan zeyu dos digadogu kumbara sege sikdima do jabindu jerumajin odus chini ta duzu de sebu shibji she yore
So this position by lower schools, let alone non-Buddhist lower schools position that self-sufficient substantial existing self is a very elusive entity to pinpoint and identify. And it's such attributes attached to this I, attached by, let alone Buddhists, non-Buddhists, even by Buddhists, especially Vipassika. That position is quite clearly stated in Madhyamika Avatara, supplement to the middle way by Chandrakirti, where he says, Kachik means some say I is inexpressible, for it's neither the same as aggregate or different from aggregate. It's very hard to say, or it's hard to say to be either impermanent or impermanent. And with respect to these four attributes, they say we cannot really pinpoint which of these attributes the I is, and therefore yet this I, neither being one with aggregate nor different from aggregate, neither being permanent nor being impermanent, yet exists substantially, yet exists substantially, and it is performer of actions. It is the experiencer of outcomes. It is the roamer, the wanderer in samsara. It is the leaver of samsara and achieve nirvana. Could Geshe-la please explain the meaning of Zeyu?
Zeyu de la shada mangboji yorba. Tanda tunjuniwe zeyu, takwe zeyu, tanda de rangyatwe zeyu, tayu zeyu sajora. Tanda zeyu de rangyatwe zeyu sadreda. Tadi tanda de karlago warla na. Ani ko luyu le chabala, chushin luyu chaba domego dirida zeyu sad. Chudi simnal shayundu, ani simnal shayundu. Penanganzo tepta waji luyu le shana, ani tegi bakbada kato da mangbo jingyen la simli sha, ani tep shago da. Anzo di na shiri, di da yorba, zeyu chagmundo. Cheda nga siya di pungbu le tuanshinbe, wanjobo nga siya di luyu chade, pungbu luyu di macha wala, ani nga luyu le chagdo oslago, tako. Tilago, zeyu imbe gimze di, pungbu luyu chawa madoba, nga luyu chagdo oswara. Ta ranglo ki, chana pungbu luyu macha nga luyu cha yo marisi wara, paka yondi, zayu ka wara da. Tambu zeyu tanda tere, luyu cha, rangyatiwe zeyu tesi ka sumshiji yore, tadi lama washe, tanda kap digi zeyu de, rangyatiwe zeyu sade. Ta rangyatuwa se, rangyase na, ko simnala chayondi, chushinla togo mare, korang shartuku yore se wara, chedan ko rangyatuwa asade. Andro 미 부구 춘주지 콤바야지 타고 미 부구 춘주 당부 콤바제도 밀을 떠오라 밤에 겨고라 뒤두고 랑제 토요 말아 다야 콤바제도 타고 랑제 토고도 타고 콤바제 토고도 라고다 되나시 콤바제라 미 밤에 겨고 문다 코랑코랑 로토고도 되나시라지 나서야지 아니 셈날 샤윈디 풍불로일 마차와라 아니 나서야지 샤르도 오세 데리샤 땅 나서야 데리샤 랑제도 왜 데리샤 So
the translator requested clarification on the term zeyu. Ze means substance. Now we are using adverb substantially, and yu means exist, substantially existent. The term substantial existence or existing substantially is explained in or at least in three different areas, and one such area is here, ranked, and here zeyu, substantial existence, existing or substantial existence, refers to rankitupa, self-sufficient. Self-sufficiency is equated with substantial existence. So what is the meaning of substantially existing or substantial existence? A phenomenon that exists substantially self-sufficiently, a phenomenon that exists self-sufficiently and substantially is that to know which you don't have to know other things, or to put differently, is a phenomenon which can be understood on its own terms, not via some other things. For example, the book I'm holding, the book is imputed, because for me to say a book, I say it's a book dependent on the color, the shape, and so many other things. And depending on these attributes, the term book is imputed. So now the proponents of the lower school, anyway, those who believe in self-sufficient, substantially existing self, say you can immediately latch onto you can immediately pinpoint to a substantially existing self without identifying it through aggregates, independent of, without considering aggregates. Directly you can hit the bullseye, as it were, an independent, self-sufficient, substantial existing. And now the lower school and our position is, it's not possible at all for anyone to approach self without approaching the aggregates. Self is invariably posited, dependence on the aggregates, because if the dependence for its identification, it can't be self-sufficient. Yes. Okay, sorry. Thank you for that. For example, the toddler analogy is, when a toddler is not able to walk, it depends on the parents holding hands. And once the toddler is able to walk, and the parents are full of joy. Look at him now; he can walk by himself. And in the same way, proponents of a self-sufficient I are saying, Look at I exists by itself, independent of the aggregates.
어디 랑게데 제스 데데스 다다다 먼저 섬나라 샤단데 요레 먼저 가 섬는데 풍불라 마데베 풍불로유도 차마데와 갈로유 차든 조서지 디아 지윤디 랑게데 제유 진도 거와 어디 다그란 요레다 먼저기 녀에 뭐니 주나래다 먼저 라추고요 말하단다 라추나 만한줄라 디사바 소고 말은 만한줄 섬나라 샤단데 요르다 지금 건저 요가데 라고요로 된데지 도 세전 디레샤스 라고요르미시 디 ngaran deba di indi khelen chogres lagoyo mata nge sim nal nyoya nal dinde jle yung do dire shas lagoyo ro je ngaran joge tenje ge nyoya nal yore ngasu du ani 풍불라 töme ji ani ngasu du luide chagdos o dinde di ngadida pere shas ta jethwa koran mindu pe ko lende ge chawa chigido khowal kyangdo ta ko damenda changmal rogodo pe hallewa je reshas ta di ro 미다고레 라이면도 그 저왕아질을 두고도 따고레 라이면도 양 상상을 교도 얘기 소리도 다디 촌에 셰즈 촌에 대하면 요지레셔서 됐도 감독님들 수수 냠뇽게 ngo트바디야 셰양고라 간저 찬나데 요래 찬나 요래 징기 요래 아마 저 ngo트마도 지레메시 지그라 파양 싸워 속어야 된대 게요 말이다
So, logically, we are able to refute existence of such self. Emotionally, instinctively, we are not experientially at instinctive level. When I appears to the mind, I appears by itself, unrelated to the mind. Logically, philosophically, we're able to say that its position is untenable. Experientially, we still cannot help in still believing that there is such an I, and as soon as I crops up before the mind, for one, it immediately seems to be by itself. It's a unitary by itself. It's a loner by itself. It can be. It is not dependent on aggregate. And so that's at the experiential level, our inability to see its position otherwise is innate grasping at this self, and its appearance to the mind is its appearance of appearance of such a self at the innate level. So the proponents of self-sufficient, substantial existing self, they express how they feel about how they experience, and for them, they say when I appears, it seems to appear by itself, not dependent on aggregates, and so it's really hard for us to say what it is. It is so it's hard for us to say what it is. We cannot give full verbal justice to its precise identification. Yes. So this is a home minister that is not able to look after internal affairs, and so shall we show the door?
Yeah. Tadejago.
Nice.
Meda dam, Lera Lenshi Ninde Jemba de Sanje Shinde.